Hello, welcome or welcome back to the Yarn and Yarns YouTube channel. My name is Angela and all the places you can find me should be linked in the description box below this video. Here on the channel you'll find me chatting about my adventures in knitting, spinning, crochet and weaving, all of the fibre related things. Today's video is my July making wrap up, so I'm going to be chatting about all of the things that I worked on during the month of July. And I have a little bit of knitting and a lot of spinning to share with you. July was Tour de France month, the cycle race, which also means it was Tour de FLEECE month, as the cyclists are racing through doing all of their challenging rides. Then spinners spin their wheels or turn their spindles, and yeah, it's a big community event in the spinning world every year. If you happened to watch my July making plans video, you'll know that I had grand plans for concentrating mainly on spinning and knitting as and when I could. So I've got a fair few things to share with you, and I think as I did concentrate more on the spinning side, there's less knitting to talk about this month. I will start with the knitting, we'll get that chatted about, and then I can share with you all of the spinning that I've done a little bit later. I picked out 4 projects to work on during the month of July and I've got 2 finished objects, 1 project that I didn't touch and I've also got 1 project that is sadly going to go off to the frog pond. I'm not going to be finishing it. Again, if you did watch my July making plans, one of the projects that I picked out was a little hand spun gnome that I had started last year at some point, and my aim was to try and pick a couple of little projects to work on alongside my spinning, and I thought the gnome was going to be the thing that I was most likely to finish, and actually it turned out to be the thing that I didn't end up picking up at all. So I've got nothing to share with you on that, but I thought I would mention it for anyone who did watch the making plans video and wondered what happened to that project. So yeah, that's a nice quick easy summary because no progress was made, nothing nothing happened with that one. For the project that I am sadly not going to be continuing with, I saved it to share with you, a skew sock. Now this was a lovely pattern that was picked out for me to make by the lovely Mel of Mel Brown Crafting podcast. You can find her over on Instagram, and Mel often posts lovely little short videos about the projects that she's working on over on Instagram. I did my little spinning wheel to pick someone from the community to choose a project for me to work on in July, and Mel picked this lovely pattern. It's a free sock pattern you can access via the Knitty website. And so I treated myself to some lovely new yarn from Fab Funky Fibres, and this is a self-striping yarn dyed here in the UK in the Visitor colourway. I accidentally made a little mistake with my order, and I thought I'd ordered 100 gram skein and I only had ordered a 50 gram skein. So that was one little setback at the start of the month, because usually I can get a pair of socks out of a 50 gram skein of yarn if I do contrast heels, toes and cuffs, but because of the way this sock was constructed, I didn't want to do any contrast. I just wanted to sort of knit the sock. I got to the point where I've pretty much finished a sock and so here it is. I kept it on the needles just so I could show you my knitting progress. Isn't this colourway gorgeous? This beautiful sort of self-striping with this deep aubergine sort of purpley colour in the background, and then all of these lovely bright stripes. I had so much fun with this pattern. The construction is just nothing like I've ever knit for before with a sock. You do all sorts of interesting things to create this slanted look to the sock. So this is the toe down here, and so yeah, it was just such a fun knit. The issues for me arose when I got to the point where I do the heel turn, and I followed the instructions, and there's this amazing moment where you think, what on earth am I knitting, because it's this very odd shape, and then all of a sudden something, you just following the instructions along, and all of a sudden you've kind of turned and you've got a heel, and it's kind of a little bit of knitting magic. Unfortunately, the first attempt at doing this meant that the sock was too tight to fit on over my heel. There are some instructions on the designer's blog for how you can make some adjustments to the pattern to help with any fit issues you might have. So I had sort of knit to about this point, and then I ended up ripping back to a few inches and trying one of the adjustments that the designer had recommended. I knit back up to past the heel, and the sock was fitting okay. It was a bit snug, but I could get it on over my foot. So I thought, great, I shall carry on and we'll get this sock finished. And at that point I was thinking I needed to order a second ball of yarn so that I could make myself a pair of socks. For one reason or another, it was a busy month and I didn't quite get around to ordering that second skein of yarn. And as luck maybe would have it, it was possibly a good thing in the end, because as I got to work the top of the leg, you start working short rows to sort of resolve the skew that you have knit into the sock. And as part of that process, you're also doing a few decreases. Started the first few rows of the rib and I thought, oh, just out of interest, I'll pop this on and see how long the leg looks and how the fit's looking. And unfortunately, I just can't get this on again. There's something about this short row section here which is just tightened up to the fabric again, to the point where I just can't slip it over my heel. So I put the sock to one side and was having a think about how to proceed. My first thought was I would just cast off, because, you know, I've got almost a whole sock here and I had those issues with it. I'd put quite a lot of time and effort into making this first sock, and I thought, oh well, you know what, I'll just carry on and finish the sock, get another ball of yarn and put these in the gift pile. But the more I thought about it, the more I decided I want to keep this yarn for myself. It's a self-striping indie dyed yarn, which is not the cheapest of yarns to buy. It's actually quite a treat to be able to pick up a skein like this. The selfish part of me was thinking, like, do I want to spend, including postage, what would be close to 20 quid to get another 50-gram skein of yarn? So, you know, it's not cheap yarn, just to then give these socks away. Although I don't mind spending money on yarn and I don't mind spending money on yarns that I'm going to gift, I just really kind of had my heart set on this colourway. Obviously I chose it for this sock, and so ultimately I have decided I'm going to be ripping this sock out and I shall use this self-striping, probably with some kind of contrast, to knit a pair of vanilla socks or something for me. And so sadly the skew socks are not meant to be, at least for me. But, you know, I'm not even mad about it, because I literally had so much fun with this sock. The construction's just, as I said, so just completely different to anything that I've done before. And yeah, I just had a great time with it. So I'm glad that I got to knit the pattern, even though the socks didn't work out. And Mel was knitting along with me, so we had lots of great messaging backwards and forwards, just to see where we were. We were checking in with each other's progress and giving each other encouragement. So yeah, the whole experience was just so much fun that I don't even mind that I'm not going to have a pair of socks at the end of it to show. That is the tale of the skew socks, and now I've showed it off here, I will be ripping this out and repurposing this yarn at some point in the future. I'm not in a rush to get this cast back on, but I do want to selfishly keep this colourway to myself. And I'm not discounting the possibility of knitting a pair of skew socks again in the future, because it was just a really fun knit, and I think I could definitely see myself knitting a pair to put in the giveaway basket or to knit as a gift for someone else. There are many pairs of socks listed on the Ravelry project page, so although these socks aren't going to be a good fit for everyone, they're obviously a good fit for a lot of people. So there's nothing wrong with the pattern, it's just you know, not everything works for everyone, and sadly the skew socks just aren't going to be for me. As we're on the sock train, as it were, I have a finished object to chat to you about, and I did complete a pair of the Contrast Blast socks, which is the Stephen West mystery knit along that happened throughout July and into the beginning of August. I think we're probably safe now for spoiler territory, at least I hope so, because I've already flashed my sock at you. But yeah, we're quite a few weeks now after the end of the sock along, so I'm sure pretty much everyone has been spoiled. Anyone who might have been knitting along trying to avoid spoilers has probably seen spoilers by now. So yes, here are my version of the Contrast Blast socks. I picked 2 skeins of yarn again from my stash. The first one is a skein from Wool Is the Answer in the Lazy Dandelion colourway, and this was actually a skein of yarn that was from my self-destructing yarn basket. and I'll pop a link to that video if you're new to the channel and you're wondering what if I'm talking about self-destructing yarns. Then I've got a little video chatting about a little sort of de-stash adventure that I'm on this year, and I picked out a few skeins from my stash to go in the basket to try and knit through. I was really happy to be able to use, or partially use, one of the skeins from my self-destructing yarn basket. I haven't weighed this, but as you can see I've got quite a lot left. I divided my yarns in half because I decided to knit the socks concurrently. So the socks came out in weekly clues, so I tried to knit clue 1 on both socks each week, clue 2 on both socks each week. So yeah, I had 2 sort of sets of needles on the go, so I divided my yarn in half just to manage that. But yeah, I've got quite a lot of yarn left over, so I'm going to be thinking about another pair of socks to make with this yarn soon, I think. Contrast colour, the green, is from West Yorkshire Spinners, and it's the spruce colourway. And again, I've got plenty of that left as well. Yeah, a pair of socks finished. I have mixed feelings about these socks. I absolutely loved knitting these socks. Every week I enjoyed each of the clues. There was slip stitch patterning happening, there's some cable going on, some fun sort of colour work detail on the heel, and yeah, each week it was just really fun to knit. However, overall I don't know if I'm a fan of the completed design. Because I've got a slightly smaller foot, I didn't get into the very last sort of part of the pattern. Also, because I wanted to adjust the length of the leg, I've got a couple less pattern repeats in this section here, which means that my sock maybe doesn't look quite as balanced as if you were to knit the sort of full sock to pattern as written. We all have different size feet, right? So and also I don't like to knit too long a leg on my socks. One, because my feet and legs get a bit too warm if I've got a lot of wool around the bottom of my feet and legs, and 2, if I knit too long a leg, because of the way that my legs are shaped, I have to end up doing calf shaping sort of relatively quickly compared to some people. Yeah, I wasn't able to sort of knit the full sort of clue 2, I think it was, and the full clue 4. Unsure. I think they're a real statement sock. I mean, it's a lot of fun, isn't it? But there's some texture going on here which adds a little bit of bulk around that ankle sort of placement, which I'm not quite sure of. And the way that you have your yarns worked on the bottom of the foot means that you've got these sort of big stripes, and the way the pattern is written, you're carrying your yarns up the middle here, which is essentially the middle of the bottom of your foot, and I'm not sure how that sort of ridge of yarn is going to sort of feel when I wear these socks, but I will reserve judgment on that until I actually get round to wearing these a few times. Most of the contrast bars, I don't think I've got too much more to say about those. In July I did lots of extra content over on my Patreon page for the Patreon community members, and I've got 4 vlogs dedicated to each of the weekly clues on these socks. So if you were interested in any more sort of detailed thoughts on that, those videos are over there if you wanted to join our Patreon community. I don't always talk about sort of Patreon other than sort of briefly mention it, but I will just mention here, it's probably as good a time as any, that I'm making some changes over on Patreon in terms of the content that I offer there and the benefits for the different sort of levels of support over there. And so I have recently posted a video chatting about the changes. The video is available sort of publicly, anyone can click on and watch it, so I'll pop a link to the video down below here. So if you were at all interested in supporting the work that I do here and joining the Patreon community, then now might be a great time to hop on board and sort of check out what I'm going to be offering over there. And as I say, there's a video chatting all about the changes and all about the extra content that I am hoping to provide over on Patreon in the coming months. Back to the contrast blast socks. There are lots of nice details. I quite like this broken rib toe, and I really liked the sort of colour work detail on the heel as well. So there are definitely elements of this sock that I think would be quite fun to move over to different patterns. I would be very, very interested to hear everyone's thoughts on these socks, whether you knit them or not. If you worked on it, did you enjoy it? Did you love it? Do you love the finished objects? Now, if you didn't join in with the mystery aspect now that you've seen the sock, would you jump on in and knit a pair I would love to know. I really enjoy the contrast between this lovely sort of lightly speckled yarn from Wool Is The Answer and this spruce green colourway. I think holding the yarn up a bit closer to the camera you can see the different flecks of colour. So I think I might be tempted to knit a pair of socks just using the helical sort of striping method with these colours. I've already sort of got these you know, divided into 2 sock quantities, so I might knit a pair of these, and I'm thinking I might make these for my mother-in-law as her Christmas socks or her birthday socks, because I think that would be a great way to use up the yarn, and it's kind of already ready to go. It would be nice to use those 2 yarns together, as from my eye at least they have worked really nicely together in this pattern. And then finally for knitting, I have one more finished object to share with you, and again you may have already seen this because I have a 12 cast-ons making vlog which I recently posted all about this project, dedicated 100% to this project, and it is my litmus cowl which I knit from handspun yarn. So I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the litmus pattern. It is by Jude of Stranded Dye Works. It's a free pattern which may or may not be available on Ravelry as I'm posting this. I know that Jude recently mentioned on his podcast that he was revamping the pattern a little bit, taking new photos and making a new sample, and so I think the pattern had been temporarily taken down from Ravelry, but it should be available soon, if not already. Again, I'm not sure. This project has been about 18 months in the making, and that's because it was a spin to knit project. So all of the yarns in this cowl I spun on my support spindles, and I undertook this as part of my 12 cast-ons, not this year but the year previous. And again, if you're new to the channel and you're wondering what I'm talking about when I mention the 12 cast-ons, it's just a fun little make-along that I have been hosting for the last few years, where at the end of each year going into the beginning of the following year I cast on 12 new projects, usually on 12 consecutive days, to try and set myself up for my year or years worth of making. And yeah, we have a whole knit along based around that in the Yarn and Yarns community now, and again I'll link to a playlist if you are interested in sort of popping back and finding out a bit more about that. So yeah, I started this spin to knit project a couple of years ago, and it ended up taking me a little bit longer than I anticipated because I changed my mind partway through about the yarns that I wanted to use in this cowl. And so that sort of set me back a little bit in terms of the time that it took for me to make this project. And then I also sampled up a few different colours to use as my sort of main colour, and eventually settled on this lovely blue fibre. So the fibres were originally, the blue is from John Arbon, and then all of the sort of contrast mini stripes were from fibre from Wonderful Wool, which I got in an Halloween countdown box, fibre box, a couple of years ago. I have loads of yarn left from this, of the contrast colours, so I shall be looking out for a project to knit these up into. I think I did ask for your suggestions on the litmus cowl video, and I've already received a lot of great suggestions for patterns that I could potentially use these up in, and actually I think I may have settled on a project for them, but I'm not going to mention that now because I might change my mind. Who knows when it will go onto the needles. Anyway, litmus cowl done. I'm not going to put it on today because it's so warm, and again there is a video previous to this if you haven't already seen it. If you want to see me wearing this, then there's a shot at the end of that video of me trying that on. So that was everything for my July knitting. July spinning, there's a lot. This basket is more or less full of yarns that I spun or worked on during the month of July, so I'm not quite sure how we're going to do this, how we're going to get through it all. I think I will probably spend a moment just trying to split these down maybe into some kind of category selection so that I can group a few things together and wave them at you. I think I will start with 2 projects that are still in progress, then move on to the yarns that I finished. So if you watched my July making plans, you might remember that I had a few spins in progress at the start of the month. The first one of my goals that I wanted to try and work through was to continue to work on the spin to knit project that I again started for one of our 12 cast-ons a couple of years ago, and I'm spinning through some fibre for a love note sweater, and I'm happy to say that I made some great progress on that spin, to the point where the yarn is almost finished, as in it's outside hanging up on the line drying at the moment. So I'm classing it as a work in progress for July because the plying has actually happened this month in August. So I think I have got a shot or a picture of my little basket of singles. I'm going to hopefully put those on the screen now, and then there you can see the progress that I made on this spin in July. And you'll get to see the finished yarn in my August wrap up. One of the other things that I said I wanted to tackle in that July making plans video was that I had a sample box from Spin Jones, one of our lovely fibre dyers and suppliers here in the UK. Over the last few years I've dipped into that sample box every now and then and pulled out a little something to spin, but my aim this year was to try and spin through as many of those quantities of fibre in the box as I can. So I've got quite a few spindles here to share which are full up with singles, and these are all merino and silk blends from that sample box. So I have got 1, 2, 3, 4 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9 and 10. So these were all spindles that I filled up during the Tour de Fleece month, and they're now patiently waiting to be plied. I still have a few more quantities of this merino silk blend to work through from the box. I'm slowly filling up the rest of my support spindles because yes, I've just shown you 10 support spindles and that's not the whole of my support spindle collection. I know. So I'm keeping going on the spinning of these fibres until my spindles are full, and then once they are full I shall wind all of these off and ply them up into yarns. I did, however, manage to finish a few of the samples from the Spin Jones box, and these were all slightly different blends, so I shall hold up the skeins that I finished. So here we are, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mini skeins. I have this one which is merino bamboo and mulberry silk. I have these two which are merino llama and rose fibre, and then I have this little collection of 3, and these are merino flax and tussar silk. Also on my spindles I managed to complete 2 more bats from my fibre advent. This was an advent swap that I did with my friend Lisa last December, and I've been steadily working my way through the bats in that advent calendar, and I've got 2 left to finish now. So I've spun 22 of the 24. This one was a Blueface Leicester, and this one I think was a mystery fibre mystery blend. On my Turkish spindle I had some Rolags that I was spinning up from fibre from Spindles and Stitches. This was a merino and sari silk blend, and here is my finished yarn for those. I've got 2 skeins here because when I went to ply this I plied up all of the little turtles of fibre that I'd taken off of my Turkish spindle, and I thought I'd finished all the plying, and then of course another one turned up. A few days or a week after I thought I'd finished this spin, I found another little sample. So altogether I've ended up with 158 metres, 52 grams, and this yarn is 14 wraps per inch, which puts it about sort of DK weight. The final 2 yarns that I have that were spindle spun, I worked on this Devon close wool. This was some Rolags that I recently purchased on a little trip when I went down to Devon to visit my brother, I spun these on my support spindles. It's this kind of combination of pastel-y colours, which aren't my favourite colour-wise, but I wanted to try out this fibre, this Devon close wool fibre, and I wanted a little souvenir from that sort of trip, that little visit to my brother. So yeah, I put this on the spindles fairly quickly after we got home, and I've ended up with 51 grams, 130 metres, 12 wraps per inch, again in the sort of DK weight range. On my drop spindle, I finished one little set of Rolags that I made on my blending board a little while ago. This is just a little sample of 34 grams of fibre, 54 metres, it's 8 wraps per inch, so it's a Aran to chunky weight yarn. And I've got loads of little sets of Rolags of about 30 grams to spin through. I think I'm going to end up making some sort of patchwork cardigan jacket type project from these yarns, but this is going to be a very long-term work in progress. I've also got 3 sock yarn spins to share with you from my tour spinning. The first are 2 50-gram skeins, and I spun these from a quantity of fibre that I had, again from Spin Jones, and it was lots of little bits of fibre. It was called a sock fibre scrap bag or something like that. Oh, sock fibre scraps, it's on my label. As I divided my fibres up, I put them into sort of 2 different colour families, as it were, and I spun the yarns 2 different ways. The blue one is a 2-ply, and it's 51 grams, 170 metres, 20 wraps per inch. And the green one, I did a 3-ply, so a chain ply, and it's 62 grams, 150 metres, 16 wraps per inch. So my green one's slightly thicker than the blue one. But my idea with these 2 is that at some point I will probably knit up 2 pairs of shorty socks for the summer for myself. I had lots of fun with those and deciding how to spin up those sock yarn scraps. So yeah, I have fond memories of that spin. Finally, in the sock yarn category, my last spin of the month, I asked the Patreon community to vote on one of my fibre braids. If you watch my July video, my July making plans video, you would have seen that I picked out 10 fibre braids from my stash that I put into a basket, and I was just going to try and spin through as many as I possibly could. And we got to the last few days of the month and I had 3 braids left in there, and I knew that I wasn't going to spin through them all. I asked the lovely folks over on the Patreon community to pick my final spin for me, and they picked some fibre from Penberth Yarns, and it was superwash, merino and nylon. There's no colourway to this fibre, but it's these lovely blues and oranges. So this was my main skein of yarn. I 3-ply this. I did a traditional 3-ply at a fractal spin, so I split my fibre down into 3 sections, and then I spun each third, splitting each of those down again. And so I ended up with my main skein, which is 95 grams, 230 metres, 15 wraps per inch. So it was thicker than I was aiming for, but it really poofed up in the wash. It always happens. Always happens. So yeah, I shall be knitting a lovely pair of socks from that at some point. And then inevitably, where I split my fibres down, one of my bobbins ran out in the plying process before the others. So I've also ended up with a little mini skein of 2-ply. That's just 4 grams and 16 metres or so. A couple of months ago, I went to my friend Samantha's for a fun dyeing day. She let me play around with her dyes and her dye pots, and I dyed some Jacob fibre, some Humbug Jacob, and I ended up with 3 different braids in 3 different colours. And so I decided it would be fun to spin those up as part of the tour. So this is my selection of hand-dyed Jacob fibre. I've got one in greens, one which is oranges and yellows and reds, a little purple skein, and then I've got a smaller skein in here, which again is all of the sort of leftovers from the plying of the different braids. These are all 3-plies, with the exception of the mini skein, which is a 2-ply. I might possibly end up weaving with these, but I'm not 100% set yet. Oftentimes my hand spuns don't have definite plans attached to them. I just enjoy the process of spinning, and I will find a use for the yarn at some point in the future. Still more hand spun. We're not finished yet. My aim was to try and spin at least 50 grams a day per day throughout the whole of July. I think with the exception of about 3 days I did manage to do that, so a lot of spinning was done. In my little selection of braids that I pulled out from my stash as possible spins. I had this beautiful Masham from Attic Spin Dye in the Castaway colour, and I had loads of fun with this. I'd just come off the back of a trickier spin. In contrast, this Masham was just a joy to spin. It spun up really quickly. I didn't aim for a particularly fine yarn. This is 2-plied on my e-spinner, and again I did a fractal spin, 10 wraps per inch, so an Aran weight really, and I've ended up with 183 meters in this skein. And I'm leaning towards knitting a hat with this particular yarn. It's gorgeous. That is definitely one of my favourite spins of the tour. The spin that I did before that, in contrast, was this one, and this was a spin that I really like the finished yarn, but I didn't enjoy the spinning process, and it was a braid of Rambouillet from Hilltop Cloud, and there was just something about this fibre that I didn't particularly enjoy as I was spinning it. I think I need to have one more go with Rambouillet just to see if there was something about this particular braid, this particular batch of fibre, maybe the way this fibre was dyed, to see whether that was the issue or whether it's just that Rambouillet is a fibre that I don't enjoy. That could also equally be the case. So yeah, I did a 2-ply fractal on this, and it is 362 meters, 14 wraps per inch. And yeah, like I say, I love the colours and the finished skein of yarn, but the spinning itself did not bring me joy. Have no clue what I'm going to knit with that one or make with that one, so if you have any suggestions, please do let me know. I have this beauty from Wildcraft UK, was the fibre dyer. It's a mix of wool, flax and silk, and again I found this spin a little bit trickier with the blends of different fibres. Flax is quite hard to work with in terms of the staple length, and I did a 2-ply from the fold spin with this. It's not my most consistent yarn, but I think it will work up just fine whenever I work with it. 283 meters, 102 grams, 14 wraps per inch. I really enjoy the fresh green colours in this particular braid of fibre. I did one slightly off the wall attempt at an art yarn spin, and again I used one of the bats from my advent calendar, the swap that I did with Lisa. I did a core spinning experiment, which I then thread plied, and I thread plied with 2 different kinds of threads just to have fun and just a little bit of a mindless spin in terms of I wasn't aiming for anything in particular, just wanted to play with some art spinning techniques. The original bat is Hill Radna with some mystery fibre and also some eyelash yarn blended into it, which was just real fun. A little bat from Lisa in my advent, and I thread plied my core spun yarn with one thread that has got these tiny little sequins in. It's a bit hard to show them on the camera, and another just red variegated embroidery thread. Almost at the end, just 2 more to share with you, and these are both in the kind of merino category. So the first was a work in progress at the beginning of the month, and I received a gift of some lovely fibre a little while ago from my lovely friend Caroline of Colourful Creativity, and Caroline sent me 2 braids that had been dyed as mirror gradients. So I've spun the first quantity of that fibre. I had a few issues with my spin, but I've found workarounds for them. The fibre was felted basically, so I had to put it through the drum carder to open it back up again. So again, this is not the most consistent spin, but I did manage to get spinnable fibre from something that was quite difficult to work with, you know, when I first picked it up. So I'm more than happy with the yarn that I got from this, and it's 104 grams, 197 meters, 12 wraps per inch. Last but not least, I have already wound these yarns up because I had hoped that I might be able to start knitting with this one, but it wasn't to be. I am working on a Sun Gazer, which is a top, a sweater, a garment pattern by James N. Watt, and this is a spin to knit project, so you might have heard me chat about this before. And I spun up earlier on in the year some Ashford fibre, some Ashford Merino. To pair with that, I have these beautiful bats from Hobbledehoy that I have been squirreling in my stash. One of those fibres that were just kind of too precious to spin. A gift from another friend of mine, another Lisa, ages ago, and I was just a bit afraid of spinning them up and kind of ruining the fibre, but it's high time that this fibre got spun. And so I worked through the Hobbledehoy bats, and these are the yarns that I had from those. And again, I think this has been one of my favourite spins to finish this month. Just these colours are just glorious. So yeah, I did cake those up with the intention of knitting the next sort of wedge on my Sun Gazer top, but I ran out of time, so I didn't end up doing that in the end, which was a little bit of a shame, but they're there waiting for me to have time to pick it up and continue with this project. There we have it. That was all the spinning, a lot of spinning that I managed to get done during July, the Tour de Fleece month. Spent a good portion of my free times in the evening knitting, and I swapped that knitting time for spinning this month, which was why I managed to get so much done. And I'm glad I did, but I now need to find some more projects to cast on with my handspun yarn. Although my fibre stash is starting to decrease, my handspun yarn stash is increasing exponentially. So yeah, if you have any suggestions for lovely patterns to work with handspun, please do let me know. I'm thinking next month, so for September, I'm thinking I might have a month where I concentrate on trying to work on projects knit with handspun yarn. I start trying to pick up the pace using some of these yarns. I might not be cast-ons, I've got a few handspun projects on the go already. Yeah, I think it'd be nice after my month of spinning to have a month of working with my handspun yarns. Anyway, I think I have kept you for long enough today. Please do let me know in the comments below, what did you work on during July? Did you join in the Tour de Fleece? Did you meet your spinning goals? If you are not a spinner, what did you work on knit-wise, crochet-wise, weaving-wise? Let me know in the comments below. I love to hear from you. I love to be inspired by all of the things that you're working on. I will be back again soon with some more making content here on the channel. It's going to be time for my September making plans soon. This month is already whizzing by. So yes, I hope you will join me for the next video, but until we do get to spend time together again, I hope you get to do some of the things that you enjoy. Great big woolly hugs to you all. Bye for now. Bye.